Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about the financial challenges I encounter whilst living as an expat in Spain and things I wish I knew about money before moving here. So if you don't know me, hi, I'm Alice, I'm a chartered accountant and I moved to Spain from the UK 5 years ago during the pandemic, just before Brexit happened. And I absolutely love it here, but it comes with some challenges, and financial challenges are a large part of this. So as you know, the Spanish economy is not the best. It's actually the fastest growing in Europe right now, so things are getting better. That means that the costs are going up, but unfortunately the salaries are stagnating. So I'm very lucky. I work in an American company here, but I still have a Spanish salary and I still pay taxes in Spain and all of that good stuff. So I am working here as a Spanish worker, but from the Spanish office. However, the headquarters is in the US, so the salaries tend to be typically a little bit higher when you work for British or American companies. However, it's still not on par with what I would be getting, of course, if I was living in Northern Europe or the US. When you're moving abroad, you need to think through a few things. 1, what are the upfront costs? 2, what's the income in that country versus the cost of living? And 3, what could be some of the banking and savings challenges, things that you don't really think about investing and saving. You also want to think about taxes and investment limits. And then of course you always have those everyday money challenges that you have also in your home country, like going to the bank, conversion fees, credit scores. So I'll talk about that too. So let's start with the upfront costs when you move abroad. You really need to think about what are the visa costs, what are the residency fees. For me, I just had teaching program fees. So the way that I moved to Spain originally was I taught English for a year, which meant that I could move here, I got my residency, and then I managed to find a job in my second year of being in Spain, which is very lucky. But I also had the chartered accountant background, so it was a little easier. But I taught English in a school and I earned €1,000 per month, but I had to pay over £1,000 to join that program. And with that program, they gave you help with getting the residency, etc. But it was not worth it. It was very expensive, but it was the only way that I could move here because by the time I moved, a lot of the teaching programs had closed. So yeah, so you need to think about everything. If you come in to teach English, what are the fees going to be for the teaching program, if anything? What are the visa residency fees going to be? I think to become a resident, it probably didn't cost me more than €50. I think you have to pay some costs related to your NIE, which is your residency card, but apart from that, it's not too bad. But I think if you are coming on a digital nomad visa, which is now the new thing, how people are coming to Spain from the US and the UK, I think there are quite a lot of fees with that. And you also have to think about the taxes and the yearly fees you need to be autonomo, which is a freelancer in Spain. And there's a lot of controversy about this because Spain doesn't exactly promote entrepreneurship or being a freelancer. So you have to pay a lot of money in taxes, and you also have to pay a monthly fee of almost €400, I think, after a couple of years. €400 per month just to be a freelancer. And then you have taxes on top of it, which I think is typically higher than being an employee. Then, of course, you need to think about deposit for houses. So you need to put a deposit down. A lot of places, especially in Madrid, will also charge you an agency fee, which can be 1 or 2 months of rent. So if you're spending €1,500 on an apartment per month, you will need probably 3,000 to 4,500 just for the deposit and for the agency fees. My point here is moving abroad is often more expensive than people think. Okay, number 2 thing that you need to think about when moving to a country and that I found really difficult was the income versus the cost of living. So I thought everything in Spain is so cheap, and it is much cheaper than Northern Europe. However, the prices have increased significantly with inflation, as they have in all other countries. But as I said at the start of the video, the Spanish economy is growing the fastest in Europe. And what comes with that? Well, increased prices. And unfortunately, the salaries are not going up. Therefore, people have less disposable income and they cannot pay for the things they used to pay for, which is meals out and eating out and drinks, which I will say is cheaper. So you need to look at all the expenses that you will have and how expensive they are. So of course, housing here is cheaper than Northern Europe, but it's really not that much cheaper. If you want to live in the city centre and you want to live somewhere modern, it's very competitive, not as competitive as other cities like Amsterdam, but it is competitive and it's not as cheap as you think. Also, groceries here are expensive. I didn't realise this. Groceries here are more expensive than the UK, and the salary is like 50% of what you would get in the UK. Therefore, your disposable income may be a little lower. For me, it's not really the case, but for some people it could be. So make a budget. As I always say in all my personal finance videos, make a spending plan, a budget of what your income would be and what your expenses will be, and do some research. You can use ChatGPT to see what the average costs are. But I will tell you, if you want to move somewhere like Madrid and you want to live on your own, you probably are looking to be paying about €1,500 per month for an apartment. around the city centre. That could even be 2,000 if you want 2 bedrooms. Groceries will probably cost you around 300 euros per month. And eating out, well, it depends how much you eat, where you go. I think you can go and get tortilla and croquetas from, Pez Tortilla and places like that, and get a small caña of beer, and it doesn't cost you a lot. So that number really depends. If you want to move somewhere like the Costa del Sol in the south of Spain, then apartments will be a little cheaper, although this is really changing. But you can probably find an apartment again for around 1,200 to live by yourself. But if you want a bit more modern, it might go up to 1,500. I know someone who was living there and they were paying 900 euros for their rent in the city centre. So it is cheaper than Madrid, and eating out there is slightly cheaper. But if you go into the city centre where all the tourists are, in somewhere like Malaga, then eating out is probably going to be more expensive than even Madrid. Okay, number 3, banking and savings challenges. There are so many things I did not know about Spain. For example, there's no high yield savings accounts. The highest one I think you can get is 1%, compared to in the UK you can get 4, 5, 6%, even 7% sometimes. And so yeah, saving your money here does not go very far. It does not beat inflation. As well as no high yield savings accounts, there is also no tax advantaged accounts. So for example, in the UK you have the ISA, which means you can put £20,000 in that account and all the gains made on those investments will be tax-free. That does not exist in Spain. So everything is taxed. All the gains you make on your investments are taxed. And this is something I wish I knew, because whilst I was in the UK, I would have maxed out my ISA to 20,000, or probably didn't have that money at the time, but I would have maxed out as much as I could into my investment, into my ISA. And then when I moved to Spain, I would have, invested separately, but I would have had that tax advantage amount in there. Unfortunately, I didn't invest when I moved to Spain. I only found out about it about 4 years ago, hence why I'm trying to teach people about it who don't know. But yes, so that is annoying. No tax advantaged accounts, ISAs or anything. Spain really need to do this. If the government are watching, which you're probably not, please create higher yield savings accounts. Please help people by having tax advantaged investment accounts to persuade more people to invest. Okay, and number 3 out of those bankings and savings challenges was credit cards. So credit card points and credit card rewards is not as crazy here. So people do have credit, but it's not as yummy and delicious and enticing as it would be in the UK and the US. You don't have as many point systems. I tried to apply for a credit card and I got rejected, which comes on to my other point. When you move here, you won't have a credit score. I don't have a credit score because I didn't have credit. Even now, I was living in apartments that I was renting where the owner was paying all the bills. I tried to get an iPhone at the Apple store where you pay monthly. It got denied. Credit card got denied. So I haven't been able to have a good credit score here, which can also be a real challenge. So it's harder to get loans, mortgages, and good credit. A banking and savings challenge that doesn't come directly from Spain, but it comes from me living here, is my student loan. So I have to pay my student loan back based on my income. However, they use my gross income and not my net income. So that means I'm worse off here because the taxes are higher. So taxes in the UK are actually lower, which means that I am paying back more on a percentage basis of the net income that I get than I would in the UK. So say I earn $1,000 per month in Spain, I could be paying 200 on my student loan, but only 150 if it was the UK. So that is also something that's very annoying and that I didn't think. Number 4, taxes and investment limits. So yeah, of course, taxes are higher here. And you also have to consider if you're a US citizen that you might get double taxed. I think there's a double taxation treaty, but you always have to declare your income in the US. So I'm very thankful that I'm not an American citizen for that reason. It also may be hard to invest back home because brokerage accounts may limit your activity if they know you're now a resident of another country. So you also need to investigate that. I think in practice, a lot of people keep their investment accounts from their prior country and their bank accounts, and it's okay, but you need to check that out. And in general, different tax systems to navigate. The Hacienda here in Spain, which is the tax tributaria, I think it's called, are very, very strict, and they don't let you get away with anything. You have to submit a tax return every year, even if you are just a salaried employee, which is something I didn't know in my first year or my second year. And then I managed to miss the deadline and then I got a fee. But then I think I had such a tax refund that it offset the fee. But anyway, I still got some tax refund, but that is a big challenge that I didn't know. I didn't know that I had to submit a tax refund, a tax return for a salaried employee. I thought my employer did it. I thought the government did it, like in the UK, but it's not the case here. You'll have to file one. So really get to understand wherever you move through friends the financial implications of moving there, especially regarding taxes. Number 5, everyday money challenges. Here, I guess you could talk about interest rates, currency exchange rates. Currency exchange rates especially is interesting because I often want to save in pounds, or sometimes I want to invest in dollars into my eToro account. I need to pay my student loan in pounds. So I have Revolut, and Revolut is life-changing for me. This video is not sponsored by Revolut, but again, I would be okay if that happened. Yeah, Revolut is great, and with different plans you can get a certain amount for free. I think with the free plan you still get up to £1,000 or euros or dollars free to exchange, and it's at today's rate, so it's incredibly efficient. So having Revolut has been a game changer for me when I've had to be always switching from euros to dollars to British pounds, and it's also great for travel. So that's it. My takeaway for expats or anyone that's wanting to move to a different country, especially Spain, is research banking and investment options before you move. Number 2, super important, keep a financial cushion. Make sure that you have a certain amount of money in your bank account to fall back on if you need to. I do know that a lot of people have to have that anyway. To be on the digital nomad visa, you need to prove a certain amount of funds. Number 3, don't assume you'll have the same financial tools abroad. A lot of the advice on YouTube is centered around the UK and the US, and that is not the same for a lot of other places, even in Europe. Even in somewhere like Germany and the Netherlands that is very advanced, I am surprised they don't have tax advantaged investment accounts, for example. And number 4, long-term financial trade-offs, pensions, investments, credit history. I didn't get onto pensions. I have 2 in the UK and I have 1 here, and I do invest in my pension here still because it's free money from my employer. I still have to give up money, but I still think it's worth it because that pension amount, especially with the Spanish economy growing, hopefully will grow. And also, if I end up living in a different country, I can still take it out here, but I would have to take it out in a lump sum and then get taxed. Pensions in Spain, also to mention, is not tax-free completely as it is in the UK. So normally it comes out of your salary and then you get taxed on that amount. So you get taxed less by investing in your pension. Whereas in Spain, that does happen, but in Spain, there's a limit, €2,000 per year, I think, whereas in the UK, it's £80,000. So again, the financial advantages of Spain are not the best. But overall, I'm very happy I moved here. The quality of life is amazing, and for me, it's worth it. I can still save, I can still invest, I can still go out and have fun and enjoy. My essential expenses are under 50%. If I had a car, I do think that would go to 50% and maybe a little bit more, but it is possible. If you're a professional working in accounting, law, or you're a freelancer where you make over €50,000, I think it is doable to save, invest, and still live a good life. So that's all for now. If you want to know more about personal finance, money tips, building wealth, or even a little bit of expat life in there too, hit the subscribe button. I would love it if you could help me grow this channel, and I'll see you in the next one.